Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Why do we as Muslims reject Western thoughts, Western metrics, and Western madness? Because the project of the West has never been about justice. It's always been about justification. Justification for conquest, justification for pillage, justification for elevating their own lies while dehumanizing our truths. That's why Middle Nation stands on three core aims. The first being psychological decolonization, freeing our minds from narratives written by the colonizer. Economic sovereignty, which is to ensure that our livelihoods are not chained to Western powers. And then lastly, political independence, because we do not want our policies dictated by external powers. And the foundation of all three is something much deeper. It is about Islamic epistemological sovereignty. Now, what's epistemology? It's the study of how we know what we know in a nutshell, For centuries, Western epistemology defined itself by denying ours. They rewrote history to center themselves, while turning our histories into footnotes, into myths, or backward traditions. They told us that their sciences are universal, but ours are cultural. That their economics are rational, but ours are primitive. That their wars are just, but ours are terror. Now look at the inherent contradictions of Western thought. How can a civilization claim racial superiority, yet always cry victimhood, insisting they're manipulated by the very people that they call inferior? How can they preach rule of law while breaking every law that doesn't suit them? Isn't this just moral cowardice? Blame shifting so they never face accountability. When genocides were committed in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, they were not accidents, they were institutions. They were their values in action. But instead of owning up, the West always needs a scapegoat. Think about this. Between 1500 and 1900, Europe extracted an estimated $97 trillion worth of wealth from colonies. Now that is not trade. That's theft. In the Congo alone, King Leopold's project killed up to 10 million people. That's before Hitler was even born. And the so-called democracies of Europe and America directly sponsored coups across Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, from Iran in 1953 to Chile in 1973 to Egypt in 2013. And still, they tell us that they are the guardians of morality. The late South African scholar Ruth First wrote, when she described the brutality of the West, she said power lies in the hands of those who control the means of violence. Her book called The Battle of the Gun has shown how the West's epistemology has always been the battle of the gun. Violence is how they define truth. If they could conquer you, then you were wrong. If they could enslave you, then you were inferior. If they could silence you, then you were irrelevant. But here is the madness. Power based only on violence is fragile. Israel, for example, is portrayed as mighty, but its power is entirely dependent on the United States of America. Without the US weapons, without the United States of America's money, and without America's vetoes at the United Nations, it collapses in months. That's not sovereignty. That's dependency cosplaying as dominance. And the West calls this strength, but we call it utter madness. Islamic epistemology begins with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And without Allah, every analysis is superficial. The West asks, who has the biggest army? Who controls the markets? Who dominates the narrative? But Islam asks, what is just? What is true? What is accountable on the day of judgment? You see the difference? Madness mistakes capacity for violence as power, but Islam teaches us real power is justice, mercy, and truth. Real power is sovereignty under Allah's guidance. And today, look around. The world is shifting. BRICS is challenging Western finance. GCC countries are breaking old alignments. The ICC, long used as a Western tool, is being forced to turn its eye on Israel and America. The axis of power is moving. And yet, Muslims must remember, sovereignty is not about swapping one colonizer for another. No, sovereignty begins in the mind, in our hearts, and in the knowledge systems. So ask yourself, why does the West exaggerate minority involvement in its failures? Why did Germany blame Jews for losing World War I? Why does America blame immigrants for economic decline while its corporations offshore jobs? Why does Europe blame Muslims for radicalization while its bombs radicalize entire nations? Because admitting the truth that their own systems, their values, and greed caused the collapse. Because that would mean accountability. And accountability is what the supremacist mind fears the most. So why do we reject Western thought, metrics, and madness? Because they are designed to serve only one master, and that's the ego of empire. But Islam gives us a higher standard, not the ego of man, but the justice of Allah. The West says, might makes right. Islam teaches truth makes right. The West says power is violence. Islam teaches power is justice. The West says history is what we write. Islam teaches history is what Allah records. If anything, I want you to remember this. If you let the colonizer define your reality, you will always remain an NPC in his story. And that's why we reject Western thoughts, metrics, and madness. Now the West had the gun. We have the truth. And the truth will always outlast the gun.